Next quote. It is unclear how the Bayes theorem can be worked out in practice. End of quote. Dr. Tucker, page 117, Licona. So now we've looked at presuppositions and how we're all biased. Now we're going to look at, and I've tried to be fair, I have said that evangelical scholars can also be biased, but specifically given in-depth analysis of Fort Atheist and Richard Carrier's Bayes theorem. Next part of the lecture. Next part of the lecture, methodology. In the methodology, we're going to look at comprehensiveness and depth, the historical grammatical method, historical criteria, and E.P. Sanders. Methodology, not A, comprehensiveness and depth. Adolf Schlatter, 16th of August to 1852 to 19th of May 1938, wrote over 400 papers on theology and New Testament studies. He is ranked as one of the great theologians of modern times, equal in stature to that of Bultmann. His historical method will be used for this lecture. He advises that you avoid sectarian bias, that you study all relevant material before you come to any conclusion. He seeks to understand the historical context, and this is important, the historical context of any given ancient text. It gives equal time to primary source material and engaging with scholars in the field you are working. I think in this method you get comprehensiveness and depth to your scholarship. Adolf Schlatter, The Significance of Method for Theological Work, Translation and Commentary, Robert Yarborough, is the paper that you need to read there. So we've looked at comprehensiveness and depth in our method, and then we're going to look at number B, the historical grammatical method. Next, I hope to use the historical grammatical method for understanding ancient text. The Academy today has many intellectual tools for understanding text, such as postmodern readings, feminist readings, postcolonial readings, etc. The HGM is short for historical grammatical method. HGM treats text in a fair and wide-ranging way. It is able to draw on textual criticism, source criticism, redaction criticism, but does so in the interest of seeking, and this is the point, of what the text meant in its own time. Dr. Bob Utley explains what the HGM way is. Now, Dr. Bob Utley is a theologian, and he's going to explain the historical grammatical method as we would study the Bible, but the historical grammatical method is a good method to use for any ancient text. And it's important to use the historical grammatical method because it means that we're being more objective in our quotations of ancient historical material. Often in debates that I've heard many debates of scholars, atheist and Christian scholars, where they're debating or where they will in their writings quote ancient text, like it might be the Extension of Isaiah or Philo or Josephus, and then when you go and investigate them, an example is Dr. Richard Carrier. I've often looked at his quotations on Josephus, Philo, and the Extension of Isaiah, and I've often found that his quotations have been quoted out of context. And if you want more information of that, I'll try and put a link tonight concerning that comment. So it's important that we have a good method for studying ancient text, and the historical grammatical method is a good method. I'm going to just read Dr. Bob Utley, what he says about the historical grammatical method. Just take the basic principles, what he's saying. He's a theologian, he's talking about the Bible, but you can use these principles for any ancient text, and they're good principles. He says the first principle is to note the historical setting, quote, the first principle is to note the historical setting in which a biblical book was written and the particular historical occasion of its author. That's really important if you're doing ancient historical studies. Of the original author had a purpose and a message to communicate. The text cannot mean something to us that it never meant to the original. Ancient inspired author. His intent, not our historical, emotional, cultural, personal, or denominational need, is the key. Application is an integral partner to interpretation, but proper interpretation must always precede application. It must be reiterated that every biblical text has one and only one meaning. This meaning is what the original biblical author intended through the Spirit's leadership to communicate in his day. This one meaning may have many possible applications to different cultures and situations. These applications must be linked to the central truth of the original author. For this reason, this study guide commentary is designed to provide a brief introduction to each book of the Bible. Page 3, Dr. Bob Utley in his seminar on hermeneutics. Now, just to unpack that just quickly, take out the little bit about where it says the Holy Spirit there, but generally the basic principles there are very helpful. When we're looking at ancient texts, we've got to try and understand what the author's saying. Okay, we've got to make sure that we don't bring our cultural bias into the reading of the ancient text, etc. That's all really he's saying. Second principle. The second principle is to identify the literary units. Every biblical book is a unified document. Interpreters have no right to isolate one aspect of truth by excluding others. Therefore, we must strive to understand the purpose of the whole biblical book before we interpret individual literary units. The individual parts, chapters, paragraph, verses cannot mean what the whole unit does not mean. Interpretation must move from deductive approach of the whole to an inductive approach to the parts. Therefore, this study guide commentary is designed to help the student analyze the structure of each literary unit by paragraphs. Paragraph and chapter divisions are not inspired, but they do aid us in identifying thought units. Interpreting at a paragraph level, not sentence, clause, phrase, or word level, is the key in following the biblical author's intended meaning. Paragraphs are based on a unified topic, often called theme or topical sentence. Every word, phrase, clause, and sentence in the paragraph relates somehow to the unified theme. They limit it, expand it, explain it, or question it. A real key to proper interpretation is to follow the original author's thought on a paragraph basis through individual literary units that makes up the biblical book. Page 3, Dr. Bob Utley's seminar textbook, PDF, 240 pages on hermeneutics by Dr. Bob Utley. You can get it at www.freebiblecommentary.org, seminar textbook, PDF. Now, basically what Dr. Bob Utley is saying is that whenever you're looking at an ancient text, make sure you get it in its paragraph context. Often, like people like Richard Carrier will quote the extension of Isaiah, one piece, and it's just not in that whole paragraph section what that part that he's quoted means. So whenever I'm quoting from the Bible or whether I mention an ancient text, I have to make sure that I've done some kind of work in trying to understand the literature that I'm quoting. And you have a responsibility when you are quoting any ancient text to have made sure that you are quoting it in context. And like I said, in many debates, when scholars are debating, they often quote